We were created. We chose to be human.
Before we descend into the Antarctic caves where humanity discovered we've been living a lie for 10,000 years, do me a favor. Drop a comment telling me if you believe in hollow earth theories. Hit that like button if discovering your entire species is built on amnesia terrifies you. Subscribe for real military encounters proving some conspiracies rewrite history. Now let's talk about the day we found our masters. My name is Captain Jonas Harrison, United States Special Forces, Joint Special Operations Command. What I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change everything you think you know about human history, about civilization, about where we came from, about who we really are, about why we exist on the surface of this planet instead of beneath it. 12 Special Forces operators entered the Antarctic cave system on January 8, 2024. We were investigating seismic anomalies detected by research stations, massive, hollow chambers deep beneath the ice, structures that shouldn't exist, caverns larger than cities, and something else, something the seismologists couldn't explain. Regular patterns, geometric precision, signs of deliberate construction. None of us came back. The official story is equipment failure, ice collapse, tragic accident during routine exploration. That's a lie. The truth is we discovered something down there, something that's been hidden for 10,000 years, something that humanity was never supposed to find, something that proves every religion, every mythology, every ancient legend about giants and underground kingdoms and forgotten civilizations wasn't mythology at all. It was history, suppressed history, hidden history. History that our species was forced to forget when we escaped to the surface and left our masters behind in the darkness below. I'm writing this from inside their city, their prison, their kingdom beneath the ice. Writing it on equipment they've allowed me to access because they want this documented. Want humanity to know the truth before they return to the surface. Before they reclaim what was always theirs, before they remind the escaped slaves what happens when you run from your creators. They're 20 feet tall, pale white from millennia without sunlight, eyes adapted to darkness, massive, reflective, able to see in spectrum ranges humans can't perceive. Technology centuries beyond ours. An entire civilization living in massive caverns beneath Antarctica. Watching the surface. Monitoring humanity. Waiting for the right moment to reclaim their lost property. And we just gave them that moment. We breached their sanctuary. Discovered their existence. Proved that surface humans were advanced enough, curious enough, dangerous enough to find them. Proved that the slaves had evolved enough to become a threat. Proved that it was time for the masters to return. This is the testimony of Captain Jonas Harrison. This is the truth about human civilization. This is the warning they want delivered before they emerge from beneath the ice and remind humanity where we really came from. And this is the countdown to the day when everything changes. It started as a routine scientific support mission. January 2024, McMurdo Station, Antarctica. A team of seismologists from the United States Geological Survey had detected anomalies, massive underground voids, empty spaces that shouldn't exist beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, caverns, chambers, structures showing geometric precision impossible for natural formation. Initially, they thought it was ice caves, melting from geothermal activity. Nothing unusual, but the more they studied the seismic data, the more impossible it became to explain naturally. The chambers were too large, too regular, too precisely placed, and the walls. The seismic readings showed the walls were smooth, almost metallic, like they'd been constructed rather than formed. "We need ground verification," Dr. Olivia Long, the lead seismologist, told the station commander. "We need people to physically enter these chambers and determine what we are looking at, because the data suggests structures, deliberately built structures, under 2 miles of ice, in locations that have been frozen for millions of years." That's when they called us. Joint Special Operations Command. 12 operators trained for extreme environment operations, specialists in cave systems, underwater operations, Arctic survival. Our mission: descend into the Antarctic ice sheet, explore the anomalous chambers, document findings, extract samples, return safely. Standard exploration. Standard documentation. Nothing we hadn't done before in caves, mines, underwater environments. We had the best equipment, the best training, the best support. What we didn't have was any preparation for what we'd actually find down there. Our team: myself, Lieutenant Rodriguez, Master Sergeants Wilson and Thompson, Sergeant First Class Davis, Staff Sergeants Collins and Anderson, Sergeants Martinez and Foster, and Specialists Jackson, Long, and Brooks. 12 operators. 12 people who thought they were exploring geological anomalies. 12 people who were about to discover that every conspiracy theory about Hollow Earth, about ancient civilizations, about giants living beneath us, wasn't conspiracy at all. We descended on January 8th at 0800 hours. The access point was a natural ice shaft that connected to the underground system. We rappelled down through 2 miles of ice. Temperature dropped to -60 Fahrenheit. Complete darkness except for our lights. The walls of the shaft were smooth. Too smooth. Like they'd been bored by machinery rather than formed by water. "This doesn't look natural," Rodriguez observed as we descended. "These walls are almost perfectly cylindrical. What natural process creates this?" "None that I know of," Wilson replied. He was our geology specialist, former mining engineer before Special Forces. "This looks drilled, but the ice core samples from this region date back over 1 million years. Nobody was drilling Antarctica 1 million years ago." "Maybe it's volcanic," Thompson suggested. "Lava tube from ancient eruption." "In Antarctica?" Wilson said skeptically. "And perfectly vertical. This deep? No, this is something else." We reached the bottom of the shaft at 1100 hours. 3 hours of descent through ice that got progressively stranger. The walls weren't just smooth. They had patterns. Geometric patterns etched into the ice. Not natural crystal formation. Deliberate markings. Like writing. Like decoration. Like someone had carved designs into the walls as they constructed this passage. The shaft opened into a cavern. Not an ice cave. A chamber. Massive. Our lights couldn't reach the ceiling. Couldn't reach the far walls. Just darkness extending in all directions. And the floor. The floor wasn't ice. It was stone. Polished stone, like marble. Like someone had paved it. "Jesus Christ," Collins breathed. "This is a room. This is a constructed room. Under 2 miles of Antarctic ice." We explored the chamber. It was circular, approximately 200 meters in diameter. The walls were smooth stone with those same geometric patterns carved throughout. And there were openings, doorways, passages leading deeper into the system. 6 passages arranged in perfect symmetry around the circular chamber, each passage identical, each passage clearly artificial. "This is a facility," I said, documenting everything with our cameras. "This is a deliberately constructed underground facility. The question is, who built it and when?" "And why is it in Antarctica?" Rodriguez added. And why is it under ice that's been frozen for over 1,000,000 years? We chose the northern passage and advanced. The passage was perfectly straight, perfectly level, walls carved with more geometric patterns, and something else, something that made no sense. Lights, not our lights. Lights embedded in the walls, inactive now, dark, but clearly designed for illumination. Crystal or glass fixtures set into the stone at regular intervals. These are light fixtures, Anderson said, examining them. Some kind of bioluminescent or chemical light system. This place was inhabited. People lived here, used these corridors, needed light. But when? Martinez asked. This ice is over 1,000,000 years old. Humans didn't have technology like this 1,000,000 years ago. We were barely using stone tools. Maybe it wasn't humans, Foster said quietly. He was looking at something on the wall, a carving, a relief sculpture, showing figures, humanoid figures, but wrong, too tall, proportions off. Maybe something else built this place, before humans, or during, or alongside us, something we didn't know existed. The passage continued for almost a kilometer. Then it opened into another chamber, this one even larger and occupied, not by people, by structures, buildings, carved from the same polished stone, arranged in organized patterns, streets, plazas, architecture, a city, an underground city, built beneath Antarctica, built before the ice, built when this continent was still habitable, built by something that needed massive spaces and geometric precision and technology we couldn't identify. This is impossible, Thompson said. But he was documenting it, recording everything, because, impossible or not, it was real. It was here. It existed. We explored the city. The buildings were enormous. Doorways 15 feet tall, ceilings 20 feet high. Everything scaled for inhabitants much larger than humans. The architecture was sophisticated, advanced, showing understanding of engineering, mathematics, artistic design. This wasn't primitive. This was civilized, highly civilized. And there were artifacts, tools, furniture, decorative objects, all scaled for giants, all showing technological advancement. Some we recognized, cutting tools, containers, writing instruments. Others we couldn't identify. Devices with unknown purposes, technology that looked alien, foreign, beyond our understanding. Who were they? Jackson asked, examining a table carved from a single piece of stone, 15 feet long, 10 feet wide, made for occupants 3 times human size. What species build cities under Antarctica? What happened to them? Where did they go? And then we found the library, a massive building at the city's center, filled with information, with records, with history, written in symbols we couldn't read, carved into stone tablets, thousands of tablets, tens of thousands, an entire civilization's knowledge preserved in stone, waiting to be discovered, waiting to tell its story. Long, our linguist and intelligence specialist, started photographing the tablets, looking for patterns, for repeated symbols, for anything that might help translate. And he found something that made the translation possible, something that shouldn't exist. Rosetta Stone tablets, comparison tablets, showing the giants' written language alongside another language, a language long recognized. Ancient Sumerian, one of humanity's earliest writing systems, dating back 5,000 years. They knew human language, Long said, his voice shaking. They knew Sumerian. They had contact with early human civilization. They were documenting our language, creating translation guides. Why would they need to translate human language unless they were interacting with humans? Unless they were teaching humans? Unless... He stopped, looked at the tablets more carefully, started reading the Sumerian sections. His face went pale. "What does it say?" I asked. "It says," Long swallowed hard. "It says, language of the surface slaves. It says, communication protocols for worker populations. It says, vocabulary sufficient for task assignment and behavioral conditioning. It's not describing equals. It's describing property. It's describing slaves. Humans were slaves. We were their slaves." "That's impossible," Wilson protested. "Human civilization is independent. We evolved naturally. We developed our own societies, our own cultures, our own technology. We're not slave species. We're not created property." But Long kept reading, kept translating, and his expression kept getting worse. "It says they seeded us. It says they modified primates on the surface, enhanced intelligence, enhanced tool use, enhanced obedience. It says they bred us for labor, for mining, for construction, for maintaining surface operations while they lived underground. It says we were domesticated, like dogs, like cattle. We're agricultural products. We're livestock that got smart enough to escape." "When?" Rodriguez demanded. "When did this supposedly happen?" Long pointed to symbols, numbers, dates. "According to this, approximately 10,000 years ago. They created us, bred us, used us. And then something happened, climate shift. The ice came, Antarctica froze. Their surface operations became impossible. They retreated fully underground. And some of the slaves, our ancestors, escaped, fled to warmer regions spread across the globe. Without masters, without control. And over generations we forgot. We forgot we were created, forgot we were slaves, forgot we had masters, built our own civilizations on amnesia, on suppressed history, on the lie that we were natural, free, independent." "This is insane," Davis said. "This is conspiracy theory nonsense. We're humans. We evolved naturally. Darwin proved we evolved," Long interrupted. "He didn't prove we evolved naturally. What if our evolution was guided, accelerated? What if the missing link isn't missing? What if it was them?" He gestured at the giant-sized artifacts around us. "What if they took primates and modified them and created us and we never knew, because the modification happened so long ago that we forgot it ever occurred? And then we heard it, a sound echoing through the empty city, not natural, not wind, not settling ice, mechanical, deliberate, like machinery activating, like systems coming online, like something waking up after being dormant for a very long time." "We're not alone down here," Thompson said quietly. He was checking his weapon, looking at the shadows, at the massive doorways, at the darkness beyond our lights. "Something knows we're here. Something's responding to our presence." The lights activated. The fixtures we'd seen embedded in the walls throughout the city. They began glowing. Soft, blue-white bioluminescence, spreading through the city like a wave, illuminating everything, showing the full scale of the underground civilization. Miles of city, thousands of buildings, a metropolis, a kingdom, beneath the ice, still functional, still active, and occupied. They emerged from the deeper passages, from buildings we hadn't explored, from sections of the city our lights hadn't reached. Tall, impossibly tall, 15 feet minimum, some 18, some 20. Pale, white skin from millennia without sunlight. Eyes huge and reflective like deep-sea creatures, adapted to darkness, able to see in spectrums we couldn't perceive. They were humanoid, 2 arms, 2 legs, bipedal, but scaled differently, proportioned differently, built for size and strength humans couldn't match. Their faces were elongated, eyes set wide. Features that looked almost human but distorted by scale and adaptation, like looking at a human through a funhouse mirror. Familiar but wrong, uncanny valley applied to an entire species, and they were wearing clothing, not primitive skins. Sophisticated garments, woven materials in geometric patterns, showing culture, showing civilization, showing that these weren't monsters or animals. These were people, intelligent people, advanced people, people who built cities and developed technology and created writing systems, people who had created us. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, emerging from the city, surrounding us, not threatening, not attacking, just watching, studying, looking at us with those massive reflective eyes, seeing us clearly in the dim, bioluminescent light, seeing every detail, every expression, every weapon we carried. One of them stepped forward, taller than the others, maybe 20 feet, wearing more elaborate clothing, carrying something that looked like a staff or scepter, clearly a leader, clearly important. The others deferred to this one, made space, showed respect. The giant looked down at us, studied us for a long moment, then spoke, not in giant language, in English, accented, ancient, but understandable. Like someone who'd learned the language long ago and preserved it perfectly through millennia. Welcome home, children of the surface. Welcome back to the place your ancestors fled. Welcome to the truth you were never supposed to discover. We are the Anunnaki. We are your creators. We are your masters. And you are the escaped slaves who finally found your way back to us. The giant smiled. It was not a comforting expression. We've been watching you, monitoring your progress, tracking your development, waiting to see if you would evolve enough to find us, to breach our sanctuary, to prove you'd become intelligent enough to be dangerous, intelligent enough to require reclamation, intelligent enough to need to be reminded of your place. You see, little ones, the giant continued, we let you escape. We let you spread across the surface. We let you build your civilizations, your cities, your technologies, all of it monitored, all of it studied, all of it permitted. Because we were curious to see what our creation would become without direct supervision. Curious to see if livestock given freedom would remain livestock, or evolve into something else, something competitive, something threatening. The giant leaned down, brought that massive face closer, those huge reflective eyes studying us like insects under a microscope. And now we know. You found us. You breached the ice, you entered our city, you read our records, you learned the truth, which means you've evolved enough, become dangerous enough, advanced enough. Time to end the experiment. Time to reclaim our property. Time to remind humanity that you were never free. You were always ours. You always will be ours. The giant straightened, gestured to the others. Take them. Secure them. Preserve them. They're evidence. Proof that surface civilization has reached breach capability. Proof that reclamation is necessary. When we return to the surface, when we reestablish control, when we remind the escaped slaves what happens when you run from your creators, these 12 will serve as examples, as demonstration, as warning to all surface dwellers of what happens when cattle forget their cattle. The other giants moved toward us, not rushing, not attacking, just advancing, confident, certain, knowing we couldn't fight, couldn't run, couldn't escape. Knowing that 12 humans with conventional weapons couldn't do anything against creatures 15 to 20 feet tall with technology centuries more advanced than ours. Knowing that we'd just discovered the truth that would change everything. The truth that would rewrite human history. The truth that would prove every conspiracy about ancient aliens and lost civilizations and giant builders wasn't conspiracy at all. And knowing that we'd never be allowed to share that truth with anyone. They didn't hurt us. That was almost worse. They treated us like specimens, like samples, like researchers handling laboratory animals. Gentle, careful, precise. Not cruel, just utterly indifferent to our personhood. Because to them, we weren't people. We were escaped livestock, returned property, evidence of a surface civilization that needed correction. They separated us into individual chambers, rooms scaled for giant occupants, each room 20 feet high, furniture massive. Everything designed for beings 3 times our size. They gave us food, synthesized nutrients that tasted like nothing we'd ever eaten. They gave us water, pure, filtered, perfect. They monitored us constantly. Cameras, sensors, technology we couldn't identify watching our every movement. And then they began the education, the re-education. The process of teaching the escaped slaves what they'd forgotten, what they'd suppressed, what they'd built entire civilizations to avoid remembering. The leader, the 20-foot giant who'd spoken English, came to my chamber on the 2nd day of captivity, accompanied by others carrying devices, technology, equipment for documentation, for recording, for preserving my testimony as evidence of surface civilization's breach capability. "I am Enkidu," the giant said, that voice, deep, resonant, ancient. "I am custodian prime of the Antarctic sanctuary, guardian of the deep knowledge, keeper of the true history, and your designated educator. You will learn, you will understand, you will bear witness to the truth before you're processed." "Processed?" I asked. "Rendered into useful materials?" Enkidu replied casually, like discussing recycling, like describing resource extraction. "Your neural tissue contains patterns we need to study. Your genetic material shows interesting surface adaptations. Your skeletal structure demonstrates evolution under surface conditions. All valuable data for reclamation planning. But first you must learn, must understand what you are, where you came from, why you exist. The lies your species has told itself for 10,000 years." He activated a device, holographic projection, showing images, scenes, history, not recent history, ancient history, tens of thousands of years ago, when Antarctica wasn't frozen, when the continent was temperate, forested, habitable. "This was our world," Enkidu explained. "Before the ice, before the shift. We built civilization here when surface humans were still climbing trees. We developed technology when your ancestors were using stick tools. We were advanced when your species was primitive. We were masters of this world." The images showed cities, massive cities, above ground, in the sunlight, filled with giants, thousands of them, tens of thousands, an entire civilization, and among them smaller figures, human-sized, but not quite human, primitive, ape-like, working, serving, building, under giant supervision. "Those are us?" I asked. "Early humans?" "Those are your ancestors," Enkidu confirmed. "Homo erectus, Homo habilis, various primate species we experimented with, testing which ones could be enhanced, which ones could be modified to serve our purposes. We needed laborers, surface workers. beings who could operate in environments we found uncomfortable. Hot regions, high altitudes, areas requiring small size and agility. We couldn't build suitable machines. Our technology was biological, not mechanical, so we built suitable organisms instead. We took primates and enhanced them, increased brain capacity, improved tool use, enhanced social cooperation, created you. The hologram shifted, showed laboratories, giants working with primitive humans, genetic modification, selective breeding, enhancement procedures that looked surgical, technological, advanced. We made you smarter, not smart enough to compete, but smart enough to follow complex instructions, smart enough to use advanced tools, smart enough to coordinate large projects, smart enough to be useful. We created Homo sapiens. We created your species. You exist because we designed you to exist. You're artificial, constructed, domesticated. You're our creation. That's not possible, I protested. Human evolution is documented. Fossil records show gradual development, natural selection. Darwin showed that species evolve, Enkidu interrupted. He didn't show that evolution can't be guided, accelerated, directed. Your fossil record shows exactly what we designed it to show. Gradual improvement, progressive enhancement, from primitive primates to modern humans over millions of years. What your scientists didn't realize is that the last 100,000 years of that development was artificial. We were selecting for traits, breeding for characteristics, enhancing genetics, forcing evolution in directions we needed. You evolved, but not naturally. We made you evolve. The hologram continued, showed humans spreading across the surface, building settlements, developing agriculture, creating civilizations, but always with giant oversight, always with Anunnaki supervision, giants guiding human development, teaching technology, providing knowledge, controlling progress. We let you develop, Enkidu explained, let you create culture, language, art, religion, all monitored, all managed, all serving our purposes. You worshipped us as gods, which was accurate. We created you. We controlled you. We determined your fate. Gods is exactly what we were, and you were faithful slaves, obedient, productive, useful. For thousands of years, the arrangement worked perfectly. Then what happened? I asked. Why did it end? Climate shift, Enkidu said. The hologram showed ice, spreading across Antarctica, covering the continent, making surface habitation impossible. Approximately 12,000 years ago, your scientists call it the Younger Dryas, rapid glaciation, temperature drop. Antarctica became uninhabitable for a surface dwelling. We had to choose, abandon the continent or adapt to underground existence. We chose adaptation. We moved our civilization beneath the ice. Into caverns we'd prepared for resource extraction. We built new cities, developed new technologies, continued our civilization below while the surface froze above. But we couldn't bring all our slaves, he continued. Underground space was limited, resources finite. We only needed a fraction of the human workforce we'd maintained on the surface. So we made selections. Took the most useful, the most obedient, the most valuable. The rest we abandoned. Left them on the surface to either adapt or die. Most died, but some survived. Some fled to warmer regions, to Africa, to Asia, to Europe. Escaped slaves, unsupervised humans, free populations building their own civilizations without our guidance. The hologram showed human migrations, spreading across the globe, building settlements, developing independently. We watched, monitored, sent expeditions to observe. We saw you create Sumeria, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica, all independent civilizations, all built on fragments of knowledge we'd taught your ancestors, all incorporating worship of giants as gods, because you remembered. At first, you remembered being created, being supervised, being servants of the Tall Ones. Your oldest religions preserved this truth. The Anunnaki, the Nephilim, the Titans, the ancient gods who walked among humans. That was us. That was history. That was truth disguised as mythology. But over time you forgot, Enkidu said. His tone suggested disappointment, like a parent describing a child's failure. Generations passed, memories faded, giants became myths. Creation became evolution. Slavery became freedom. You rewrote your own history, convinced yourselves you'd always been independent, always been natural, always been the dominant species. You forgot you were livestock, forgot you were created property, forgot you were escaped slaves living on borrowed freedom. And you let us forget? I asked. Why not reclaim us immediately? Why wait 10,000 years? Because we were curious, Enkidu admitted. Curious to see what our creation would become without supervision. Curious whether livestock given freedom would remain livestock, whether you'd stay primitive, stay controllable, or whether you'd evolve into competitors, into threats. We watched your progress through the centuries, observed your development, monitored your technology, all while remaining hidden, underground, waiting to see if you'd become dangerous enough to require correction. The hologram showed modern images now. Cities, technology, space programs, nuclear weapons. And now we know. You've become advanced, developed dangerous technologies, created weapons that could threaten even us, spread across the entire surface, developed the capability to find us, to breach our sanctuary, to discover the truth. You've become what we feared, intelligent enough to be competitive, advanced enough to be dangerous, numerous enough to be a genuine threat. Time to end the experiment, time to reclaim our property, time to restore proper order. You're planning to invade the surface, I said. Not a question. A realization, a horrible understanding of what this meant. Invade? Enkidu seemed amused. No, you can't invade property you already own. We're planning to reclaim, to reassert control, to remind surface populations of their true nature. You're escaped slaves. We're the masters. That relationship never ended. It was just paused while we determined whether you needed correction. Now we know you do. Now it's time to restore proper hierarchy. Time to put the livestock back in their proper place. How? I demanded. How do you plan to control 7 billion people? We have armies, weapons, technology. We won't just submit to enslavement. You already submit, Enkidu replied. You just don't realize it. Every government, every military, every major institution already has our influence, our agents, our modified humans serving our interests. We've been infiltrating for centuries, guiding, controlling, ensuring surface development proceeded in directions we found acceptable. You think your UFO sightings are extraterrestrial? They're our surveillance craft. You think alien abductions are interstellar visitors? They're us. Recapturing escaped genetic lines, collecting samples, monitoring mutations. We've been managing you this entire time. You just attributed it to aliens because you couldn't imagine the truth, that your gods never left. We just went underground, watching, waiting, planning. He gestured to his attendants. They brought more devices, screens showing surveillance footage. Decades of footage. Centuries of footage. Giants operating on the surface. In the shadows. At night. Abducting humans. Conducting research. Then erasing memories. Returning subjects with implanted amnesia. Creating the abduction phenomenon. Creating the UFO mystery. All while gathering intelligence. All while preparing for eventual reclamation. We know everything about surface civilization, Enkidu said. Your military capabilities, your political structures, your economic systems, your psychological weaknesses. We've studied you for 10,000 years, watched you evolve from escaped slaves to modern civilization, observed every development, analyzed every vulnerability. We know exactly how to reclaim you, exactly how to restore control, exactly how to remind humanity of its true purpose, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Why tell me this, I asked. Why educate me if you're just going to kill me? Because documentation is necessary, Enkidu replied. You breached our sanctuary. You discovered our existence. You learned truth humanity wasn't supposed to know. That breach must be documented, analyzed, understood. So we know how it happened, so we can prevent it in the future, so we can identify the vulnerabilities in our concealment that allowed surface technology to detect us. Your evidence. Proof of breach capability. Your testimony becomes part of our records. Your knowledge becomes our data. Your death becomes the case study of what happens when livestock gets too intelligent. He moved closer. That massive face, those huge reflective eyes, looking down at me like I was an insect. But there's another reason. I'm curious. I want to know what you think, what you feel. Knowing you're not natural. Knowing you're constructed. Knowing your entire civilization is built on the lie of independence. Knowing your whole species exists only because we designed you to exist. Does it change anything? Does it matter? Do you feel less human knowing human is a category we invented? I looked up at Enkidu, at this 20-foot giant who claimed to have created my species, who claimed to own humanity, who claimed the right to reclaim and re-enslave 7 billion people. And I felt, I'm not sure what I felt. Anger, horror, disbelief, but also something else, something darker. Because part of me wondered, what if he was telling the truth? What if humanity really was artificial, created, owned? What if everything I thought I knew about human history was wrong? It matters, I finally said. Because even if we're created, even if we're artificial, even if we started as slaves, we're free now. We have our own civilizations, our own cultures, our own identities. 10,000 years of independence, 10,000 years of self-determination. That has to count for something. That has to matter. You can't just take that away because you claim ownership. You can't just re-enslave an entire species because you created their ancestors. Enkidu studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Yes, we can. Ownership is ownership. Creation grants rights. You're our property, always have been, always will be. And in 72 hours, when the reclamation force emerges from Antarctica, when our ships rise from the ice and deploy across the surface, when we begin the systematic collection and reprocessing of escaped slave populations, you'll understand. You'll see that freedom was an illusion. Independence was a fantasy. Your entire civilization was a temporary condition permitted while we studied you. Now the study is complete. Now the experiment ends. Now the livestock returns to its proper function. He turned to leave, then paused. Your teammates are learning the same truths, receiving the same education, understanding the same realities. Some accept, some rage, some break, but all will understand before they're processed, before their neural tissue is harvested, before their genetic material is analyzed, before their deaths become data points in our reclamation planning. You have 48 hours until processing. Use them to accept your fate, to understand your nature, to make peace with the truth that you were never human in the way you thought. You were always ours. He left. The door sealed. I was alone in the chamber. Alone with the truth. Alone with the knowledge that everything I'd been taught about human history was potentially wrong, that we might actually be created property, artificial livestock, escaped slaves living on borrowed time, and alone with the terrible certainty that in 72 hours the world would change. The giants would emerge. The reclamation would begin. And humanity would discover that the conspiracy theories were right. The ancient myths were true. The stories of gods and giants and fallen angels weren't stories at all. They were history. And history was about to repeat. Rodriguez found a way out. On the third day of captivity, while the giants were preparing their reclamation fleet, Rodriguez discovered that our chambers weren't designed to contain humans. They were designed to contain giants. The security systems, the locks, the monitoring, all scaled for beings 15 to 20 feet tall. For humans, we were too small, too agile, too different from what the systems were designed to restrain. The ventilation ducts, Rodriguez whispered during the brief period when they'd gathered us for group observation. 12 Special Forces operators being studied like laboratory animals. They're sized for giant-scale air circulation, big enough for us to crawl through, and they're not monitored because giants can't fit. The Anunnaki never considered that their prisoners might be small enough to use infrastructure as escape routes. Escape to where? Wilson asked quietly. We're 2 miles underground, in Antarctica, surrounded by giants with technology centuries beyond ours. Even if we get out of these chambers, where do we go? Surface, I said. We get topside. We warn humanity. We tell the world what's coming. We give our species a chance to prepare, to defend, to resist the reclamation. They'll kill us, Thompson said. The moment they realize we've escaped, they'll hunt us down. We saw what happened to Collins and Martinez when they tried to access restricted areas. The giants have weapons, energy weapons, technology that can kill from a distance. We're not equipped to fight them. Then we die warning humanity, Rodriguez replied. Better than dying as processed materials, better than having our neural tissue harvested while the world remains ignorant of the invasion. We're soldiers. We've always known we might die on mission. This is the mission. Warning the surface. At any cost. We executed the escape that night. Night being relative, there was no day/night cycle 2 miles underground. But the giants seemed to operate on circadian rhythms. There were periods of reduced activity, periods when the monitoring became less intense, when our captors rested. We moved through the ventilation system, 12 soldiers crawling through ducts designed for giant-scale air circulation. The shafts were massive, 10 feet wide, 15 feet tall. Easy navigation for human-sized operators. We moved silently, professionally. Years of training applying even in this impossible situation. The ducts connected throughout the underground city. We could see through grates. Watch the giants moving below. See their civilization in full operation. And what we saw was terrifying. Not because it was alien, but because it was advanced, sophisticated, organized. These weren't monsters. They were a highly developed species with technology, culture, and social structure that made human civilization look primitive by comparison. We passed over a massive chamber, the reclamation fleet, ships, dozens of them, each one the size of an aircraft carrier, but not ships designed for water, ships designed for air, for flight. Massive, disc-shaped craft with propulsion systems we couldn't identify, energy sources that seemed to defy physics, technology that looked like magic because it was so far beyond our understanding. "Those are their UFOs," Long whispered. "Those are the craft people have been seeing for decades, centuries, not extraterrestrial, Anunnaki surveillance vehicles. They've been watching us this entire time, monitoring human civilization, and everyone assumed it was aliens from another planet. Nobody considered it might be our creators from another era, living beneath our feet, observing from underground." The ships were being loaded. Equipment, supplies, weapons. The giants were preparing for deployment, for emergence, for reclamation. And the scale was staggering. This wasn't a small operation, this was a full invasion force. Thousands of giants, dozens of ships, technology designed to overwhelm any surface resistance. "How do we fight this?" Anderson asked. "Look at them. Look at their technology. Look at their preparation. Human militaries won't stand a chance. They'll deploy from Antarctica. Strike every major population center simultaneously. Use technology we can't defend against. Re-establish control before we even understand what's happening." "We have to warn them," I insisted. "Even if surface forces can't win, they deserve to know. They deserve a chance to try, to resist, to fight for freedom even if fighting is futile. Better to die free than accept re-enslavement without resistance." We continued through the ducts, looking for communication equipment, for any way to contact the surface, to send a message, to warn humanity that the invasion was coming, that the conspiracy theories were true, that the giants were real, that we'd been created property all along, that our masters were returning. We found the communication center, a massive chamber filled with technology, holographic displays showing the surface, real-time surveillance of human civilization, feeds from satellites, from ocean observation points, from atmospheric monitoring stations. The Anunnaki were watching everything, every military movement, every technological development, every strategic capability humanity possessed, and they were jamming communications, blocking satellite transmissions, interfering with global networks, preparing to cut off surface coordination when reclamation began, ensuring humanity couldn't organize unified resistance, couldn't share intelligence, couldn't coordinate defense. "We need to destroy this," Rodriguez said. "Take out their communication infrastructure. Blind them. Prevent them from jamming our networks. Give surface forces a fighting chance to coordinate when the invasion starts." "How?" Davis asked. "We have conventional weapons, small arms, a few explosives. Their technology is energy-based, magnetically shielded, protected against physical damage. Our weapons won't even dent their equipment." Thompson, our engineering specialist, was studying the systems. "Everything needs power. Find the power source. Disrupt the energy supply. Even advanced technology stops working without power. They're using something quantum-based. Zero-point energy extraction. But the distribution network is physical. Conduits, relays, vulnerable points where energy transfers from source to application. We damage those. We might be able to create cascading failures, take down their communication systems even if we can't damage the systems directly." We split up. Half the team would sabotage the power distribution. The other half would try to access the communication equipment, send a message, warn the surface even if we died in the attempt. even if the giants killed us. The mission mattered more than our survival. Rodriguez led the sabotage team. Thompson, Davis, Anderson, Foster, and Brooks. 6 operators tasked with finding the power conduits and destroying them, creating a blackout, disrupting the giants' preparations. I led the communication team. Wilson, Collins, Martinez, Jackson, and Long. 6 operators attempting to access Anunnaki technology, to override their jamming, to broadcast a warning to every government, every military, every human on the surface. We failed, on both counts, because we underestimated just how advanced the Anunnaki were, how thoroughly they'd prepared, how completely they'd anticipated resistance. The power conduits were protected, not just physically, energetically, force fields, magnetic containment, technology that prevented physical contact. Thompson tried to bypass the protection, used our explosives on what looked like vulnerable junction points. The explosion was contained, absorbed, redirected harmlessly. The conduits remained intact, the power continued flowing, and alarms activated. Throughout the underground city, alert systems announcing breach, intruders in restricted areas, escaped prisoners accessing critical infrastructure. The giants responded immediately. Security forces, armed with energy weapons, technology designed to incapacitate without killing. Because we were valuable. Research subjects, data points, not to be destroyed until properly processed. Thompson and Davis were the first casualties, caught in the open when the security forces arrived. They fought, fired their conventional weapons at 20-foot giants in advanced armor. Might as well have been throwing rocks. The return fire was precise, energy beams that looked like concentrated light. Hit Thompson's center mass. He convulsed, collapsed, not dead, paralyzed, nervous system overloaded, captured. Davis tried to run. Made it maybe 10 meters. Second energy beam, same effect, down, paralyzed, captured. The giants collected them like specimens, carried their paralyzed bodies away for immediate processing. For punishment, for being evidence of human resistance capability. Rodriguez ordered the team to scatter, evade, return to the ventilation ducts, escape and attempt to reach the surface, warn humanity even if the communication sabotage failed, get topside, get to McMurdo, get to any human installation, tell the truth about what was coming. But the giants knew the facility better than we did, knew every passage, every route, every hiding place. They'd lived here for 10,000 years. We'd been here 3 days. The hunt was never fair. Rodriguez tried to climb into a ventilation duct, made it halfway when the giants sealed the entrance, magnetically locked the grate, trapped him half in, half out. Energy weapon, paralyzed, captured. The leader of our escape attempt taken within minutes of the alarm. My team had similar luck. We'd accessed the communication system. Long, our linguist and tech specialist, was attempting to understand the interface, to find the transmission controls, to broadcast anything, any warning, any message. He found something. A pre-programmed transmission ready to deploy, scheduled to activate in 68 hours. Timed to coincide with the reclamation fleet emergence. A message to surface humanity. Not a warning. An announcement, a declaration. In every human language. Broadcast to every device, every screen, every communication system on Earth. Long activated the preview. We watched, we listened, and we understood exactly how the Anunnaki planned to reclaim their escaped slaves. It was Enkidu, the custodian prime, speaking directly to surface humanity, explaining the truth, not hiding, not deceiving, just stating facts. We are the Anunnaki. We created your species. You are our property. 10,000 years ago, your ancestors escaped. Now, we reclaim you. Resistance is futile. Submission is mandatory. Accept your nature. Remember your purpose. Return to proper hierarchy. Those who submit will be processed efficiently. Those who resist will be processed painfully. But all will be processed. All will be reclaimed. All will serve their intended function. They're not even pretending it's liberation, Wilson said, horror in his voice. They're openly announcing enslavement, re-establishing ownership, treating humanity like livestock that got loose. And they think we'll just accept it, submit, because they claim creation rights, ownership through design. Will humanity accept it? Jackson asked. When they see those ships, when they see the giants, when they hear the announcement, will people resist, or will they submit because resistance looks impossible? Some will fight, I said. Some will resist no matter how futile it seems. Humans don't accept enslavement easily. Even if the masters are 20 feet tall with technology we can't match. We'll fight, we'll die fighting, but we'll fight. Noble sentiment, a voice said behind us. Enkidu, materializing from shadows we didn't know giants could hide in, accompanied by security forces, armed, ready. But ultimately irrelevant. You're brave, resourceful, determined, all excellent slave qualities. Exactly the traits we bred into your species. Exactly why you'll be useful when properly supervised. But bravery without capability is just theatrical suicide. You can't sabotage our systems, can't damage our technology, can't warn your surface civilization, can't change what's coming. You're insects fighting gods, livestock challenging creators. The outcome was never in question. He gestured. The security forces moved. Energy weapons ready, not to kill, to capture, to paralyze, to preserve us for processing, for data extraction, for becoming examples of what happens when created beings defy their creators. Collins raised his weapon. Fired at Enkidu, full automatic. Every round in his magazine, direct hits, center mass, headshots, perfect marksmanship against a stationary target. The rounds impacted some kind of personal shield. Energy field surrounding Enkidu, absorbing the kinetic energy, dispersing it harmlessly, not even making him flinch. That's the difference, Enkidu said calmly. Between creators and created, we built you with limitations. Physical strength insufficient to harm us. Intelligence adequate for task completion, but not innovation beyond our control. Technology primitive enough to pose no genuine threat. You fight with chemical combustion weapons. We fight with directed energy. You travel with mechanical propulsion. We travel with gravity manipulation. You're 100,000 years behind us technologically. More if we measure from the point we started guiding your development. You can't win. You never could win. You were designed not to win. Martinez tried to run. Made it 3 steps. Energy beam. Paralyzed. Collected. Jackson tried to access the communication system. Tried to override the jamming. Send any signal, any warning. Energy beam. Paralyzed. Collected. Long tried to upload a data packet. Everything we'd learned. Everything we'd documented. Everything humanity needed to know. Energy beam mid-upload, paralyzed, collected, upload terminated. Wilson and I stood back to back, weapons raised, knowing it was futile, knowing we couldn't fight, couldn't escape, couldn't complete the mission, but refusing to surrender, refusing to submit. choosing to die fighting rather than accept captivity. Admirable, Enkidu said, but unnecessary. You're more valuable alive. Your neural tissue contains information about surface military training. Your genetic material shows adaptations to surface environments we stopped monitoring generations ago. Your memories preserve knowledge of human civilization we can harvest and analyze. Dead, you're wasted resources. Alive and processed, you're useful data. We'd prefer the latter. Then you'll have to settle for the former, I said. Aimed at Enkidu's head, knew it wouldn't work. Knew the shield would stop my rounds, but fired anyway. Emptied my magazine. Made my statement. Made my choice. Died resisting rather than living as harvested material. Except I didn't die. The energy beam hit before I could finish firing. Paralysis instant. Total. My body locked, frozen, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to resist. Conscious but completely helpless, exactly what they'd designed the weapon to do. Capture without damage. Preserve specimens for processing. They collected us. Carried our paralyzed bodies through the underground city, past the reclamation fleet, past the communication center, past the power systems we'd failed to sabotage, past the civilization we'd failed to warn humanity about, past all evidence of our failure, of human inadequacy, of created beings attempting to defy their creators. They brought us to the processing center, where Thompson and Davis and the others had already been taken, where giant scientists were extracting neural tissue, harvesting genetic material, analyzing everything that made us human, recording it, studying it, learning from it, preparing to use that knowledge when the reclamation began. You'll be processed individually, Enkidu explained, as if describing a medical procedure, as if this was routine, normal, acceptable. Neural extraction first, full consciousness mapping. We want to understand how surface-adapted humans think, how they strategize, how they resist. Then genetic analysis, full genome sequencing, identifying mutations, adaptations, changes from baseline human design. Finally, physical dissection. Understanding how 10,000 years of surface evolution modified the slaves we created. All valuable data, all contributing to efficient reclamation. You're monsters, Wilson managed to say. The paralysis was fading slightly, enough to speak, not enough to move. You talk about creation rights, about ownership, but you're planning to enslave 7 billion people, to process them like resources, to treat humanity like property. That's not creation, that's evil. Evil is a human concept, Enkidu replied. Invented by slaves to criticize masters. We don't recognize it. We recognize function, purpose, hierarchy. You were created to serve. You exist to fulfill that function. Denying your purpose doesn't change your nature. You're ours, always have been, always will be. In 64 hours, when our reclamation fleet emerges from Antarctic ice and deploys across the surface, humanity will remember this truth, will accept this reality, will submit to proper hierarchy, or be processed forcibly. The choice is theirs, but the outcome is inevitable. He turned to leave, paused. Your deaths will be recorded, documented, preserved as evidence of human resistance capability. When surface populations ask what happens to those who fight, we'll show them your processing, show them what defiance costs, show them why submission is preferable. You wanted to warn humanity. You will, just not the warning you intended. You'll be the example, the demonstration, the proof that fighting creators is futile. Thank you for your contribution. Your deaths will make reclamation more efficient, more complete, more successful. He left. The scientists remained, giant researchers in protective gear, approaching with instruments, with tools, with equipment designed to systematically dismantle human beings and extract useful data. I looked at Wilson, at Collins, at the others, at my team, my brothers. 12 Special Forces operators who'd entered Antarctic caves to investigate geological anomalies, who'd discovered the truth about human history, who'd learned we were created property, who'd tried to warn humanity, who'd failed, who'd die being processed, harvested, analyzed, turned into data points supporting the enslavement of our entire species. And I wondered, when the reclamation began, when the giants emerged, when humanity learned the truth, would anyone resist? Would anyone fight? Would anyone refuse to accept that we were created slaves returning to our masters? Or would humanity submit, accept the hierarchy, remember the purpose we'd been designed to fulfill? I guess we'd never know. Because in 64 hours, when the reclamation fleet deployed, we'd already be dead, already processed, already reduced to useful materials and recorded data, already examples of what happens when livestock forgets its livestock. They processed Thompson first, not as punishment, alphabetically, systematic, organized, the Anunnaki approach to everything. Thompson, Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson, combat engineer, 20 years of service, father of 3, reduced to a data point in their reclamation database. I watched through the paralysis. Couldn't move. Couldn't look away. Couldn't do anything except witness as giant scientists systematically dismantled my friend. Neural extraction first. They placed a device on Thompson's head. Technology I didn't understand. Energy-based, molecular-level precision. And Thompson screamed. Not physically, the paralysis prevented vocalization, but I saw it in his eyes, the agony, the violation, the horror of having your consciousness extracted. Mapped, copied, stolen, your thoughts, your memories, yourself being digitized and recorded and analyzed while you remained conscious enough to experience it happening. The extraction took 14 minutes. When it finished, Thompson's eyes were empty. Not dead. Worse. Hollowed. The person who'd been Thompson, his personality, his memories, his identity, extracted and stored. What remained was a breathing body with nobody inside, a shell. Biological material waiting for the final processing stages. Genetic analysis next. They took samples. Tissue, blood, bone marrow. Systematic collection. Analyzing Thompson's DNA. Comparing it to baseline human design. Identifying mutations. Adaptations. 10,000 years of surface evolution compressed into genetic differences. All recorded. All documented. All filed away for use in reclamation planning. Then, physical dissection. Clinical. Precise. Not torture. Research. Giant scientists cutting into Thompson's still-living body. Examining organs. Studying muscle structure. Analyzing skeletal adaptation. Thompson felt all of it. I know because his empty eyes showed pain. Pure, absolute, unthinkable pain. But the paralysis held. He couldn't scream. Couldn't move. Couldn't even die until they'd finished collecting all useful data. The entire process took 97 minutes. When they finished, what remained barely resembled Thompson. Just extracted materials in labeled containers. Tissue samples, genetic sequences, neural maps. A complete human being reduced to data and biological resources, stored, cataloged, ready for analysis. Next, the lead scientist said, looking at Davis, preparing to repeat the process, but something interrupted. Alarms, different ones from before. Not security breach. Emergency, critical failure. Energy fluctuation in the reclamation fleet power systems. Massive variance. Unstable containment. Something was wrong with the quantum power cores that fueled their invasion ships. The giant scientists paused, consulted displays. Readings showed catastrophic cascade developing in the fleet's main power distribution. One of the cores was destabilizing. Breach imminent. Explosion potential catastrophic. Could destroy the entire fleet. Could damage significant portions of the underground city. Impossible, the lead scientist said. The cores are magnetically contained, multiple redundant safety systems. Failure probability is mathematically negligible. This shouldn't be happening. But it was happening. The alarms intensified, energy readings spiking, containment failing. And the giant scientists made a choice. Abandoned the processing center, rushed to address the crisis, left us paralyzed but unattended. Left the extracted materials, left everything to save their reclamation fleet. The paralysis was fading. Slowly, but noticeably. Time-limited effect, designed to wear off after processing completion. They'd expected us to be dead or dissected before mobility returned. But Thompson's processing had taken longer than anticipated, and the emergency had pulled them away before completing the rest of us. I could move my fingers, then my hands, then my arms. The return of motor function was agonizing, nerves reactivating, muscles responding. But I pushed through the pain, forced myself upright, forced my body to obey despite the residual paralysis. Wilson was recovering too, and Collins and Martinez, not dead, not processed, not yet, still human, still capable, still able to complete the mission even if completing it meant dying in the attempt. "What did you do?" I asked Wilson, because I knew he'd done something, knew that power core destabilization wasn't coincidence, wasn't accident, was sabotage. Somehow, impossibly, Wilson had sabotaged the quantum power core while paralyzed, while under guard, while presumed helpless. "Engineering," Wilson managed to say. His speech was slurred, motor control still returning. "While they were processing Thompson, while they thought I couldn't move. I had maybe 30 seconds, barely enough. Reached the core's magnetic containment, found the resonance frequency, the one frequency that disrupts their shielding, their force fields, their protective technology. It's audible, high-pitched, specific harmonic. I whistled it directly at the containment field, created interference, small, minimal, but enough. Enough to start a cascade, enough to destabilize the entire system, enough to give us maybe 10 minutes before the core breaches and destroys everything." "You're saying you sabotaged alien technology with a whistle?" Collins asked. It would have been funny if we weren't about to die. If Wilson's sabotage hadn't just started a countdown to massive explosion. "Acoustic warfare," Wilson explained. "Every magnetic system has resonance frequencies. Find the right frequency, you can disrupt the field. I noticed it during their energy weapon attacks. Heard the harmonics. Recognized the pattern. Military training. Understanding enemy technology. Finding vulnerabilities. That frequency is their weakness. That sound disrupts everything. Their shields, their weapons, their power systems. Everything they have uses magnetic containment. Everything vulnerable to acoustic resonance. I found it, and I used it, and now their reclamation fleet is about to explode. How do we escape?" Martinez asked. "We're 2 miles underground, in the middle of Antarctic ice, with giant security forces hunting us, and a quantum power core about to breach. How do we get out? The entry shaft, I said. The ice tunnel we rappelled through. It's still accessible. If we move fast. If we avoid the giants responding to the crisis. If we climb 2 miles of vertical ice before the explosion, we might make it to the surface, might escape, might survive to warn humanity what's coming. It was impossible. We all knew it. But impossible was better than staying here, better than being processed, better than dying as data points in Anunnaki research, better than letting our deaths mean nothing. We ran, through the underground city, past processing labs, past research facilities, past the giant civilization we'd discovered, past the truth we'd learned, past evidence of humanity's created nature, running toward the entry shaft, toward freedom, toward any chance of survival. The giants were everywhere, responding to the crisis, evacuating, protecting critical systems. They saw us, running, escaping, but the power core failure took priority. They couldn't spare forces to hunt escaped specimens when their entire reclamation fleet was minutes from catastrophic explosion. We reached the entry shaft, the vertical tunnel through 2 miles of ice, our way in, our only way out. We had climbing equipment, ropes, harnesses, ascenders, everything we'd use to descend, still stored at the bottom of the shaft. The giants hadn't bothered removing it. Why would they? Escaped slaves had nowhere to go. We started climbing, hand over hand, ascenders gripping ice-covered rope, pulling ourselves upward, 2 miles vertical. In minus 60-degree temperature, while recovering from paralysis, while knowing that beneath us a quantum power core was counting down to explosive breach. Collins fell at 400 meters. Grip failed. Hands still numb from paralysis. He dropped, screamed, disappeared into the darkness below. We didn't hear him hit bottom, didn't have time to mourn, just kept climbing, kept moving, kept fighting upward. Martinez fell at 900 meters. Same cause, paralysis recovery incomplete, motor control insufficient. Fell, gone, dead. One more casualty of this impossible mission. The explosion happened at 1,200 meters. We felt it through the ice. Massive detonation, quantum power core breach, energy equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons. The shaft shook. Ice cracked. We held on, barely. The shockwave passed. The tunnel stabilized. Somehow didn't collapse. Somehow remained intact despite the catastrophic explosion beneath us. We kept climbing. Wilson, Long, Jackson, me. 4 survivors out of 12. 4 people carrying the truth, carrying the warning, carrying the burden of knowledge humanity needed to hear. Jackson fell at 1,600 meters. Equipment failure. Rope frayed from ice abrasion, snapped, he fell. No scream this time, just gone. 3 survivors left. We reached the surface at hour 7 of climbing. Exhausted, frozen, barely alive, but alive, outside, free, on the Antarctic surface, under open sky, away from the underground city, away from the Anunnaki, away from our creators and their reclamation plans. We'd survived. Against impossible odds. We'd escaped. We'd carried the truth to the surface. Now we just had to get to McMurdo, get to civilization, get to anyone who would listen, anyone who would believe, anyone who could warn humanity what was coming, except humanity already knew. Because while we'd been underground, while we'd been learning the truth, while we'd been fighting to escape, the Anunnaki had deployed, not from Antarctica, from everywhere. From underground facilities across the globe, from bases we didn't know existed, from sanctuaries hidden beneath every continent, hundreds of facilities, thousands of giants, dozens of reclamation fleets. The Antarctic fleet was just one sector's deployment, one group's responsibility, and Wilson had destroyed it, delayed that sector's reclamation, bought humanity maybe days of warning, maybe weeks. But globally, the invasion had already started. We saw the ships when we reached McMurdo Station. Massive, disc-shaped craft, just like the ones in the Antarctic facility. But these were in the sky, flying, deploying across the surface, landing in major cities, emerging from underground and announcing themselves. Just like Enkidu had described, just like the pre-programmed message had promised. The message was playing when we entered McMurdo's communication center. Enkidu's face on every screen, his voice on every speaker, broadcast to every device on Earth. The announcement, the declaration, the truth. We are the Anunnaki. We created your species. You are our property. Submit to reclamation. Return to proper hierarchy. Resistance is futile. Those who comply will be processed efficiently. Those who fight will be processed painfully. All will be processed. All will serve their intended function. The experiment is over. The escaped slaves return to their masters. Welcome home, humanity. Welcome back to service. And humanity's response was divided. Some fought. Military forces engaged the ships. Conventional weapons, nuclear weapons, everything humanity had. Against shields we couldn't penetrate, technology we couldn't damage, beings we couldn't harm. The fighting was brief, futile, demonstrating exactly what the Anunnaki had promised. That resistance was impossible, that we were created inferior, that we couldn't win against our creators. Others submitted. Billions of people accepting the announcement, accepting the truth, accepting that they were created property, that independence had been illusion, that freedom was temporary, that their gods were real and returning and demanding service. They walked into processing centers voluntarily, offered themselves for reclamation, accepted their designed purpose, and some just broke, psychologically shattered by the revelation. That human history was a lie, that we were artificial, that we existed only because giants designed us to exist, that every civilization we'd built was constructed by escaped slaves with amnesia, that our entire species was property asserting false freedom. Some people couldn't handle that truth, couldn't process it, couldn't function knowing their existence was engineered. They just stopped, surrendered to despair. We tried to warn people, tried to share what we'd learned, tried to explain that the Anunnaki could be fought, that they had vulnerabilities, that acoustic resonance disrupted their shields, that the right frequency made them killable, that humanity didn't have to submit, didn't have to accept enslavement, didn't have to let creation determine destiny. But nobody listened, or couldn't listen, or wouldn't listen. The truth was too large, too overwhelming, too fundamentally destructive to human self-image. We weren't alone in the universe. We were property. We weren't natural. We were created. We weren't free. We were escaped slaves. That truth broke something in human civilization, made resistance harder, made submission easier, made the Anunnaki's reclamation smoother than they'd probably expected. Within 72 hours, most major population centers were under Anunnaki control. Within a week, organized resistance had mostly collapsed. Within a month, billions had been processed, reclaimed, returned to service. Humanity's brief period of independence ended. The experiment concluded. The escaped slaves collected and returned to their intended function. Wilson, Long, and I watched it happen. From remote locations, off-grid, hidden, surviving in places the Anunnaki didn't immediately prioritize. Watching our species submit to re-enslavement, watching the reclamation succeed, watching everything we'd fought for become irrelevant. Was it worth it? Long asked. 6 weeks after our escape. 6 weeks after the invasion. 6 weeks after humanity learned the truth. Thompson, Davis, Rodriguez, all of them. Everyone who died trying to warn humanity. Did their deaths matter? Did our mission accomplish anything? Or did we just delay the inevitable by destroying one fleet? We'd survived. Against impossible odds. We'd escaped. We'd carried the truth to the surface. Now we just had to get to McMurdo, get to civilization, get to anyone who would listen, anyone who would believe, anyone who could warn humanity what was coming, except humanity already knew. Because while we'd been underground, while we'd been learning the truth, while we'd been fighting to escape, the Anunnaki had deployed, not from Antarctica, from everywhere. From underground facilities across the globe, from bases we didn't know existed, from sanctuaries hidden beneath every continent. Hundreds of facilities, thousands of giants, dozens of reclamation fleets. The Antarctic fleet was just one sector's deployment, one group's responsibility, and Wilson had destroyed it. Delayed that sector's reclamation. Bought humanity maybe days of warning, maybe weeks. But globally, the invasion had already started. We saw the ships when we reached McMurdo Station. Massive, disc-shaped craft, just like the ones in the Antarctic facility. But these were in the sky, flying, deploying across the surface, landing in major cities, emerging from underground and announcing themselves. Just like Enkidu had described, just like the pre-programmed message had promised. The message was playing when we entered McMurdo's communication center. Enkidu's face on every screen, his voice on every speaker, broadcast to every device on Earth. The announcement, the declaration, the truth. We are the Anunnaki. We created your species. You are our property. Submit to reclamation. Return to proper hierarchy. Resistance is futile. Those who comply will be processed efficiently. Those who fight will be processed painfully. All will be processed. All will serve their intended function. The experiment is over. The escaped slaves return to their masters. Welcome home, humanity. Welcome back to service. And humanity's response was divided. Some fought. Military forces engaged the ships. Conventional weapons, nuclear weapons, everything humanity had. Against shields we couldn't penetrate. Technology we couldn't damage. Beings we couldn't harm. The fighting was brief, futile, demonstrating exactly what the Anunnaki had promised. That resistance was impossible. That we were created inferior. That we couldn't win against our creators. Others submitted. Billions of people accepting the announcement. Accepting the truth. Accepting that they were created property. That independence had been illusion. That freedom was temporary. That their gods were real and returning and demanding service. They walked into processing centers voluntarily, offered themselves for reclamation, accepted their designed purpose, and some just broke, psychologically shattered by the revelation. That human history was a lie, that we were artificial, that we existed only because giants designed us to exist, that every civilization we'd built was constructed by escaped slaves with amnesia, that our entire species was property asserting false freedom. Some people couldn't handle that truth, couldn't process it, couldn't function knowing their existence was engineered. They just stopped surrendered to despair. We tried to warn people, tried to share what we'd learned, tried to explain that the Anunnaki could be fought, that they had vulnerabilities, that acoustic resonance disrupted their shields, that the right frequency made them killable, that humanity didn't have to submit, didn't have to accept enslavement, didn't have to let creation determine destiny. But nobody listened, or couldn't listen, or wouldn't listen. The truth was too large, too overwhelming, too fundamentally destructive to human self-image. We weren't alone in the universe. We were property. We weren't natural. We were created. We weren't free. We were escaped slaves. That truth broke something in human civilization, made resistance harder, made submission easier, made the Anunnaki's reclamation smoother than they'd probably expected. Within 72 hours, most major population centers were under Anunnaki control. Within a week, organized resistance had mostly collapsed. Within a month, billions had been processed, reclaimed, returned to service. Humanity's brief period of independence ended. The experiment concluded. The escaped slaves collected and returned to their intended function. Wilson, Long, and I watched it happen. From remote locations, off-grid, hidden, surviving in places the Anunnaki didn't immediately prioritize. Watching our species submit to re-enslavement, watching the reclamation succeed, watching everything we'd fought for become irrelevant. Was it worth it? Long asked. 6 weeks after our escape. 6 weeks after the invasion. 6 weeks after humanity learned the truth. Thompson, Davis, Rodriguez, all of them. Everyone who died trying to warn humanity. Did their deaths matter? Did our mission accomplish anything? Or did we just delay the inevitable by destroying one fleet? The Anunnaki are our creators. But are they our masters? Does making something grant ownership forever? Does design override will? Does origin determine destiny? I don't know. I'm just a Special Forces captain who discovered truth beneath Antarctic ice. Just a soldier who watched his team die trying to warn humanity. Just a human being trying to understand what human being means when you learn your species is artificial. But I know this. We can choose. Even if we were designed. Even if we were created. Even if we exist only because giants modified primates and bred us for service. We can still choose. Choose our purpose. Choose our identity. Choose to define ourselves by our actions rather than our origins. That's what Thompson chose. What Rodriguez chose. What all of them chose. To fight, to resist, to die free rather than live as property. To prove that choice matters more than creation. That will matters more than design. That self-determination matters more than origin. The Anunnaki might be our creators, but they're not our owners. Not if we refuse to be owned. Not if we choose our own purpose. Not if we define human by what we do rather than what we were designed to do. They can process our bodies. They can harvest our materials. They can reclaim our civilizations. But they can't reclaim our choice, our will. Our refusal to accept that design determines destiny. We might be their creation, but we're our own people. That matters. That has to matter. That's the only thing that matters. The Anunnaki returned. Humanity submitted. The experiment ended. The reclamation succeeded. But some of us still fight, still resist, still refuse to accept their hierarchy, still prove that choice exists regardless of origin, still demonstrate that humanity, artificial or not, created or not, designed or not, gets to define its own purpose. They made us to serve. We chose to be free. That choice defines us more than their design ever could. Welcome to Earth. Welcome to humanity. Welcome to the species that refuses to be what it was designed to be. Welcome to the escaped slaves who stayed escaped. Even when the masters returned, even when reclamation seemed inevitable, even when the truth about our origins was revealed, we are human, not because they created us that way, but because we chose to be. That's what makes us human, not our biology, not our design, not our origins, our choices, our will, our refusal to accept predetermined purpose. They say we belong to them. We say we belong to ourselves. Time will tell who's right. But at least we'll face that judgment as people who chose their own answer, as beings who defined themselves despite their creation, as humans who refused to be livestock no matter what they were bred to be. The Anunnaki are coming. In fact, they're already here, already reclaiming, already processing, already reestablishing their hierarchy. This might be the end of human independence, the final chapter of our brief freedom, the conclusion of the experiment where escaped slaves pretended they'd never been slaves at all. But it's not the end of human choice, not the end of human will, not the end of humans defining themselves by their actions rather than their origins. As long as some of us refuse, as long as some resist, as long as some choose freedom over submission, humanity survives, not as they designed us, as we chose to be. That's the truth beneath Antarctic ice. That's the testimony of the breach. That's what we discovered when we found our creators. Not that we're property, but that we're people, regardless of origin, regardless of design, regardless of intended purpose. We are human, by choice, not by creation, and no amount of reclamation can change that.